"You won't last a week," the man said, already walking toward the glass door. "And I'm sorry about that, because you look like someone who actually tries." He said it calmly, pleasantly, the way you might warn someone that the coffee machine on the third floor was broken. His ID badge still read Mace Architecture in crisp sans serif. He pressed it into Vida Castillo's hand as he passed her, not meanly, just practically, the way you hand off a key to an apartment you're giving up, and kept moving. The revolving door swallowed him before she could think of anything to say. She looked at the badge. She looked at the lobby she'd just walked into. Glass walls rising 7 stories, a staircase that wound like a piece of paper someone had thought better of folding, drafting tables visible behind a wall of frosted panels. 40-some people pretending not to have watched the man leave. Then she signed the visitor's log in full. First name, last name, the time. Because she had learned years ago that small, careful things added up, and stepped into the elevator. This was how Vida Castillo became the 5th junior associate at Mace Architecture. The first 4 had lasted, respectively, 9 months, 4th month, 3 weeks, and the 11 days it had taken the man with her badge to conclude that some jobs were not worth what they cost. Mrs. Lund was waiting when the elevator opened. She was a woman in her early 60s with silver-streaked hair clipped back without ceremony, reading glasses hanging on a beaded chain of someone who had seen enough to stop being surprised by most of it. She looked at the ID badge in Vida's hand, took it gently, and said, "I'll dispose of that. You're here for the Mace position." Vida Castillo, and yes. "You've eaten?" "On the train." "Good." The second one didn't eat and fainted at her desk, and we don't speak of it. Mrs. Lund began walking and Vida followed, because the alternative was standing in the elevator forever. "I'm Elise Lund. I've run this office for 14 years. I ran it before he was difficult, and I run it now that he's impossible. Which tells you something about either my patience or my stubbornness. I've never decided which." "How do you tell the difference?" Mrs. Lund glanced at her sideways. "You're calmer than the others." "I used to work nights at an emergency intake desk. Calm is just what happens after long enough." They stopped in front of a glass-walled office at the far end of the floor. Inside, a man stood at a drafting table with his back to them, bent over a set of architectural drawings, a red pencil working in slow, deliberate strokes. He was younger than the room made him look. Early 40s, perhaps. And the tension in his shoulders was the tension of someone who had been holding something very heavy for a very long time, and had forgotten it wasn't natural. "Ezra Mace," Mrs. Lund said quietly. "You'll hear things about him. Most are true. He isn't cruel, he's just—" She paused. "He's somewhere else most of the time. In a place he keeps the door locked to. The work is the work. But the work isn't everything that's happening in this building. There's something on the calendar you'll see. A grey block on October the 3rd every year. Leave it alone. Don't ask about it. Don't reschedule around it. Just build a wall and walk past the wall every morning." "October the 3rd, Vida repeated. "Yes. That's 2 weeks from now." "I know." Mrs. Lund looked at her steadily, the way a jeweler looks at a piece of unknown provenance. "I'm telling you early because the ones who ran never knew what it was until they tried to move it, and then they understood too late. You know now, so do better." She opened the glass door and steered Vida through it with one firm hand between her shoulder blades. Ezra Mace did not look up. "You're 6 minutes early," he said to the drawings. "The agency told you to be early to show reliability. What it actually shows is that your previous job ended and you had nothing else to do this morning. Which is it?" "Both," Vida said. "I left my last position to take this one." "So you get a reliable person with a cleared calendar. That's 2 things for the price of 1 if you choose to see it that way." He turned around then. His eyes were a grey so pale. They were almost no colour at all, and they went over her the way you check a load-bearing wall, systematically, without malice, looking for the fault line. "You've been briefed on the people who left," he said. "I've been told there were 4 of them." "Did she tell you why?" "She told me about the calendar. That was enough." Something shifted in his face. Not softened, exactly, but recalibrated. He pulled out the chair across from his drafting table with 2 fingers, an invitation that looked nothing like one. "Sit," he said. She sat, but she set her bag down first, without being invited to make herself comfortable, because waiting to be invited in a room like this was how you taught someone to keep you at arm's length forever. "There are 3 rules," Ezra said. "Answer the phones, manage the client schedule, and do not touch the block on October 3rd. It has no description, no location. It's mine. I've had people in this office for 14 years, and that block has always been there, and no one who has ever respected it has needed to ask what it is. The drafting floor hummed with the low sound of a large building thinking about itself. Somewhere outside the sealed windows, a truck backed up and the beeps floated up and faded. I can do that, Vida said, on one condition. The pencil in his hand stopped. You're not in a position to offer conditions, he said. Then you can hire a sixth. It wasn't a challenge. That was the thing that stopped him. It was just a plain statement, delivered in the same even tone she'd used for everything else. The tone of a woman who had stopped needing people to like her somewhere around year 3 of the intake desk. Ezra Mace looked at her for a long moment. The old clock on his credenza, the only object in the room that didn't look designed, ticked into the silence. One condition, he said at last. If I'm going to protect something on your calendar without knowing what it is, I get one true thing about you. Not about the block, about you. Just one. You choose which. He was quiet for long enough that she thought she'd miscalculated. Then he said in a voice that had gone several registers lower than before, I haven't drawn a new line in 7 years. Everything in this office is revision. Refinement. Other people's visions made structurally sound. I haven't originated a single design in 7 years. He stopped as though the sentence had taken something with it when it left. That's your one thing, he said. You start Monday. Mrs. Lund will show you the desk. Vida picked up her bag. She did not thank him for the honesty, because she understood already. From the way he'd looked at his own hands when he said it, with the particular revulsion of someone confronting a failure they've tried to stop seeing, that pity would end her here faster than incompetence. One more thing before I go, she said. The desk, is it the one by the east window? Yes. Was it someone else's before? A long pause. Yes. If there's anything in the drawers that belongs to someone else, I'd rather know up front than find it, and not know what to do with it. Ezra looked at her. Whatever moved across his face then, it moved quickly. Mrs. Lund will see to it, he said. Goodbye, Miss Castillo. He turned back to his drawings. She left. Mrs. Lund did not, in fact, see to the desk. Vida would not learn until much later whether this was an oversight or a decision. What she found on Monday morning, when she opened the bottom drawer of the east window desk and felt something wedged beneath the divider, was a notebook. Spiral-bound, dark green cover, warped at the corner as though it had once gotten wet and dried out crooked. Dense as with handwriting on every page, small, fast, the kind of hand that thinks faster than it writes and doesn't bother going back. Architectural sketches in the margins, a coffee ring on the inside cover, and across the front, in a different hand, blocky and deliberate. Not to be thrown out. Vida opened it to the first page. Then she closed it. She sat for a moment with the notebook flat on her knees, below the desk where no one could see it from across the floor. The handwriting on the first page was not the same as the label on the cover. It was the small, fast hand, and the first line said, To whoever finds this, he never throws anything away, even when he should, so you are holding this because someone loved him enough to keep leaving him things to find. She put the notebook in the bottom of her bag. She had not been invited to read it, but she had not been invited to find it either, and those were two different situations. She told Ezra on Wednesday, because she was not number 2, and she had been told what happened to number 2. He was at the drafting table when she set it on his desk. He saw it before she'd finished placing it, and something happened in his face that she recognized, the look of a person who sees a thing they thought was safely away, and it turns out it was only waiting. Where, he said. Bottom drawer of the east desk. I found it Monday. I should have told you then. I'm telling you now. He did not touch it. He looked at it the way you look at something that has a right to be held more carefully than you currently trust yourself. I didn't read it, Vida said, past the first line. What does the first line say? She told him. Ezra was quiet for a long time. Then he reached out and picked up the notebook and turned it over once in his hands, and the way he held it, palm under the spine, both hands, the way you carry something fragile, answered a question she hadn't yet thought to ask. It was Nina's, he said, my wife. She was an architect. She worked at that desk for 11 years. She's been gone for 7. The word gone sat between them. Vida did not fill it with anything. The last pages are sealed, Ezra said. I sealed them. She told me not to read them alone. She said to wait until there was someone in the room who hadn't left. His thumb moved once across the cover, and I've spent 7 years making sure there was no one in the room who could stay. He put the notebook in the top drawer of his desk, where he could reach it easily. He did not put it back in the bottom. "Thank you for telling me," he said. "Go back to work." She did. She did not ask about October 3rd. She navigated around the grey block the way you navigate around a structural column, not because you fear it, but because it is load-bearing, and the building doesn't work without it. Gil Rourke arrived on Thursday at 3 in the afternoon. He was a tall man with silver hair and very good shoes and a smile that showed up a half-second before the rest of his face, as though it had been sent ahead to prepare the room. He came off the elevator already talking, coat over his arm, hand extended toward Vida, before he'd finished crossing the floor. "You must be the new one, Gil Rourke. I was Nina's partner, her architectural partner back when this firm had 2 names on the letterhead." He leaned slightly over her desk, the way men who are used to taking up space do it without thinking. "How is he? Between us, that formidable woman down the hall tells me lies with such a pleasant expression I've stopped trying to correct them. Mr. Mace is well. Is he sleeping? Does he still leave on the 3rd? He let that sit for a moment, watching her face with the relaxed attention of someone who has learned to read people by watching what they don't say. "I'm not familiar with Mr. Mace's personal schedule." "Of course you are. You're his calendar." Rourke set both hands flat on her desk and lowered his voice pleasantly. "Let me tell you something, since you're new and you seem sensible. There's an investors' meeting scheduled for October 3rd at 1 o'clock. I arranged it last week. The Harmon Group has been waiting 18 months to acquire the rights to Nina's unbuilt portfolio. 7 designs, 4 of them commercially viable, 1 worth more than this office lease. They want Ezra in the room. They require Ezra in the room, and Ezra, every 3rd of October without exception, is somewhere he shouldn't be." He nodded toward her screen. "Check. I added the meeting this morning." She checked. It was there, 1 o'clock, October 3rd, slotted directly across the grey block like a weight placed on a bruise. "I didn't receive a request to add this," Vida said. "You received it from me directly just now." A small smile. "I helped build this firm, Miss Castillo. I want what's best for it. Nina's designs deserve to be built. Ezra knows that. He simply needs someone to make the decision easier for him." He left before Ezra came out of his office, and Vida sat for a moment looking at the screen. At the 1 o'clock meeting settled over the grey block, and then she went to tell Ezra. He came out before she'd finished crossing the floor, as though some change in atmospheric pressure had reached him before she did. She showed him the screen and said nothing and watched him read. His jaw set at the hinge, the small hardening she was learning to recognize as the tell, the specific tightening of a man when a sentence gets too close to something he has been guarding a long time. "He doesn't have standing authorization," Ezra said. "I know, I checked." "Pull it." "If I pull it, he rebooks it before Monday. The Harmon Group is real. I looked them up in the time it took you to walk over here. The portfolio rights question is real. He doesn't need your authorization to invite them to a room and tell them you didn't show." Ezra stood very still. Outside the sealed windows, a siren started somewhere below and rose and then dissolved. "October 3rd is 2 weeks away," he said. "Yes. I don't miss it. 7 years, I've never missed it." "I know." Vida kept her voice level, not empty, level. There was a difference she'd learned at the intake desk, where the two were sometimes everything. But right now the plan is that Gil Rourke sits in that room and describes a man who didn't have the nerve to appear. And once that story is in a room, it doesn't come back out the same. Ezra looked at her for a long time. Then he went back into his office and shut the door. That evening, after the floor had emptied and the building had settled into its after-hours quiet, a folded piece of paper appeared under the supply closet door where Vida had gone to get toner. She found it when she turned around. Her name was on it in handwriting she didn't recognize. Small, upright, pressed hard enough to leave an impression on the page beneath. Inside was a single paragraph photocopied from something. The copy quality was poor, as though it had been reproduced many times over many years. "He knows what the last pages say," it read. Not the words. He sealed them himself without reading them. But she told him. She sat up on the last afternoon and told him what the last page said, and he has carried the weight of those words without reading them for 7 years. Because reading them means keeping the promise she asked him to make, and keeping the promise means choosing to stay in the world. Tell him it's time. He already knows. He's just afraid someone has to be close enough to witness it. There was no signature. Just at the bottom, a single word, "Still here." Vida folded the paper. She went to Ezra's office. She knocked. He opened the door himself. She put the note on his desk without comment. She watched him read. watched his face move through something she didn't have a word for, recognition and grief, and the specific exhaustion of a man caught keeping a secret he already knew he couldn't keep forever. "Who sent this?" he said. "I found it under a door, I don't know." Nina had a colleague, a woman who was with her at the end when Nina's hands weren't cooperating anymore. He set the paper down precisely. "I haven't heard from her in 7 years. She left the morning after Nina died, and I let her go because I could not look at the person who had witnessed what I hadn't. I was at this desk, finishing a commission, and Nina was 2 floors up in the hospital, and her colleague was sitting with her because I couldn't." He stopped. "I couldn't be in the room and hold the pen and watch her hand not do what it was told." He turned away. He did not tell her to go. Vida stood with the tick of the clock and the sealed city beyond the glass. "The last pages," she said. "What did Nina tell you they said?" He was quiet long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer. "She told me the last page was a list," he said finally to the window, "of things she wanted me to do after, small things. And the last item, the one she read to me out loud, was, 'Build the library. Don't keep the plans in a drawer. The building was never a monument to me. It was always just a building a city needed, and you're the one who can build it.' A breath. She told me not to read the rest of it alone. Wait until someone is in the room who stayed, and I have spent 7 years making certain no one stayed long enough." The clock ticked. "I'm still here," Vida said. "It came out quiet. Not a performance, a fact." He turned around. His eyes were raw in a way she hadn't seen. Not the faraway grey, not the fault line grey. Just his eyes, with nothing over them. "October 3rd, he said. "Yes. That's the day we chose the site. Nina and I. We drove out to the lot on the East End and she had the drawings rolled under her arm, and she kept laughing because the lake wind kept trying to take them. She showed me where every wall would go." Something moved across his face. "I go back every year. I bring the drawings. I stand in the field. I can't build anything while I'm standing there." "Then stop standing there alone." She kept her voice steady. 2 weeks from now, Gil Rourke is going to be in a room telling the Harmon Group who you are. We can argue about how to handle that meeting, or you can let me stand in the field with you when you read the last page, and then we go handle the meeting together." The silence that followed was long enough to be a different kind of answer than silence usually is. "You'd do that," he said, almost to himself, a man checking whether he'd heard correctly. "I came back Monday when you gave me every reason not to. I told you about the notebook when it would have been easier to say nothing. I brought you this letter tonight instead of leaving it for morning." She met his eyes. "I don't know how to prove a thing by announcing it. But yes." Ezra Mace looked at her across the room in the late light that came sideways off the buildings and lay in long, quiet bars across the drafting table. "Come to the lot on the 3rd, he said, "and Monday we go over the portfolio. I'll give you everything you need for the Harmon meeting if it comes to that." A pause. "Mrs. Lund is going to make a remark. She's made several already. I like her." For a fraction of a second, something crossed his face that was the beginning of a different expression entirely. The leading edge of something lighter. Then it was gone. But it had been there, and Vida filed it away. October 3rd came in overcast and cold for the season, the lake wind pushing down through the streets and rattling the scaffolding 2 blocks north. Vida met Ezra in the lobby at 9 in the morning. He was already there, in a dark coat, carrying the rolled architectural drawings under one arm and the green spiral notebook under the other. He had been up before the cold started, and it showed. "Gil will be at the Harmon meeting," he said instead of good morning. "He called me at 7. "I know. I scheduled you both in after the lot. 2 hours. That should be enough." He looked at her. "You scheduled a meeting you thought I was going to miss." "I scheduled a meeting I thought you were going to make." She pulled her coat closed against the wind through the revolving door. "There's a difference." They drove east in near silence. The lot was on the far side of a mixed-use neighborhood that hadn't yet decided what it wanted to be. A laundromat beside a gallery, beside a vacant building with lease signs bleaching in the windows. The lot itself was an open rectangle of gravel and dry weeds, fenced by chain link, and beyond it the lake moved in long grey swells under the overcast sky. Ezra unlocked the gate and held it. They walked to the center of the lot. He unrolled the drawings and held them against the wind with both hands, and Vida saw what Nina had seen on the first October 3rd, the library. 4 stories, eastern exposure, reading rooms with the lake in every window, a small accessible garden running the south face. It was not a monument. It was just a building a city needed, and it was beautiful the way a useful thing is beautiful, entirely and without trying. Ezra looked at it for a long time. Then he handed Vida the roll to hold, opened the notebook to the last sealed pages, and peeled the tape away carefully, because it had been waiting long enough to go soft. He read them slowly, standing in the middle of the gravel lot with the wind pulling at the pages and Vida holding his drawings, and neither of them saying a word. He finished. He was quiet. Then he said, in a voice that had been emptied out and refilled with something she couldn't quite name, "She says the same thing I told you the first day." "What did you tell me the first day?" "That I haven't drawn a new line in 7 years." He folded the pages with great care. "She says, 'Draw the line, Ezra. Pick up where the building says to pick up. You've been guarding my memory like a finished thing, and it isn't. It's a library. Libraries are for using. So use it, build it, let people in." He looked at the drawings in Vida's hands. He looked at the lot, the gravel, the weeds, the chain link, the lake beyond. "She says one more thing," he said. "You don't have to tell me." "I want to." He took the drawings back from her and rolled them quietly. "She says, 'Whoever is standing next to you when you read this, let them stay. I chose this date because I want you to remember it as the day we chose something together, not the day you lost me. Take it back. Make it the day you chose something again.'" The wind came through the chain link fence in a low, steady sound. The lake moved. Vida did not say anything, because some things don't need filling, and this was one of them. She stood next to him in the gravel lot with Nina's drawings between them and the October sky, going slowly lighter above the water, and that was enough. The Harmon meeting lasted 90 minutes. Ezra arrived 12 minutes early, which surprised Gil Rourke enough that his smile took an extra second to appear. Vida sat at the corner of the table with the financial summaries and a clean copy of the library proposal and said, when asked, exactly what the project was. A public library built from a 7-year-old set of drawings by an architect named Nina Mace, who had died before she could build it, funded by a development trust, no commercial revenue expected, not a monument to grief but a building a city needed. The oldest member of the Harmon Group, a woman in her 70s named Mrs. Ellaby, who had been in real estate development for 4 decades and had no patience left for anything performative, said, "Why now?" "Because someone finally told me to stop standing in the field and build the thing," Ezra said. It was the most honest answer in the room, and everyone present understood it was the right one, even Gil Rourke, who sat very still through the rest of the meeting, and at the end pushed the rights contract across the table without amendment. He caught Vida's eye as they were leaving, just for a moment. "She'd have liked you," he said, not warmly, flatly, the way you state a record. "Nina." She'd have liked that he finally let someone see the drawings. He looked at the floor, then at Ezra's back ahead of them. "I should have led with the library years ago. Instead of the commercial portfolio, I told myself that's what Nina would have wanted, her designs built, anything, by anyone. But that's not what she asked for." He adjusted his coat. "I didn't lose her any less hard than he did. I just picked a worse way to show it." Then he walked to the elevator and was gone. 7 weeks later, on the 1st of December, the groundbreaking ceremony for the Nina Mace Public Library happened on a Saturday morning with city officials and cold coffee, and a photographer who kept asking everyone to shift left. Mrs. Lund brought a thermos of the good tea and deployed it without being asked. The ceremonial first shovel went to Ezra, and he held it like someone who had finally figured out what his hands were for. Afterward, when the crowd had thinned and the photographer was on a cold train back downtown, Vida and Ezra stood at the edge of the lot, looking at the orange-painted survey stakes, tracing the outline of every wall in the ground. She had 2 cups of coffee from the cart 3 blocks over. She handed him one. "You brought 2, he said. From the cart, not the office machine. He turned the cup once in his hands, aligning something, then seemed to catch himself and stopped. "I told you something on the first day we met, that I hadn't drawn a new line in 7 years. I want to correct the record." He looked at her. "I drew one last week, just one. The entrance foyer, Nina had left it blank, a placeholder. I drew the line. A pause. It took 4 minutes. I stood and looked at it for 40. "It's a good line," Vida said. "I think it is." His voice was quieter now, and different from the way it had been in those first days. Less like a door held shut and more like a door someone has finally stopped leaning against. "I'd like to draw more of them. I think it helps to have someone in the room. Not watching. Just there." "I can do that," Vida said. "You'd be staying for different reasons than the job." "I know. I don't know how to say the rest of it gracefully. I've been told I'm not good at that." "By who?" "Mrs. Lund. Several clients. My own internal critic, most persistently. A breath. By Nina, actually, in the notebook. She wrote, "You feel things enormously and say them minimally, and someday that's going to cost you something you can't afford to lose. For once in your life, say the thing." He looked at her over the coffee cup. The December sky was the pale, flat grey of a city that hadn't decided on snow yet, and the lake was out there somewhere past the survey stakes and the orange-painted lines in the ground. The same lake that had tried to take Nina's drawings on the first October 3rd all those years ago. "I'd like you to stay," he said. "Not at the desk, past the desk. However that works, however long it takes, I'd like you to stay." Vida looked at him standing in the lot, with his wife's building, beginning to take shape around them, stake by stake, and thought of the notebook and the sealed pages, and the man who had stood outside a promise for 7 years waiting for permission to keep it. "I was going to stay anyway," she said, "but it's nicer that you asked." He almost smiled, and this time he let it finish. Above them, the winter sky held everything quietly, the way winter does, without warmth, but without judgment either, the color of a day that knows it still has a long way to go and goes anyway.